Live.
Great. Mm-hmm.
Streaming. We are live here on A Mighty Blaze. I am your on-air host, Sara DiVello, and I am thrilled to be here today with Sara Stewart Taylor talking about her brand new book, The Mountains Wild. Sara, welcome. Tell us about your book.
Thank you, Sara. It's so great to be here. And just a huge thank you to you and to A Mighty Blaze to start off with. It's been, when I look back on this time in all of our lives, A Mighty Blaze is going to be a big part of my memories. I've had so much fun sort of discovering new writers, and it's just been great. So thank you, and thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. We're thrilled to have you.
So yeah, The Mountains Wild, which is my new novel out today, is the story of two women who are cousins, but grew up more like sisters. And my main character, Maggie Darcy, is a recent college graduate working in her uncle's bar on Long Island when her beloved cousin Erin goes missing. Erin moved to Ireland about a year before, and she had seemed, after a lifetime of sort of being the wild cousin, the cousin who always got into trouble, she seemed to be settling down a bit, and then she disappears. And Maggie goes over to see if she can figure out what happened to her cousin. And she sort of follows Erin's path for a while. She lives in Erin's apartment. She meets Erin's friends. She tries to trace her last weeks. And ultimately, she finds absolutely no trace of her cousin. And she has to go home. And then 23 years later, new evidence is found in the area of the Wicklow Mountains where Erin went missing. And at the same time, the police in Ireland are looking for a new woman who's gone missing. And they find this new evidence. And Maggie, who is now a homicide detective on Long Island, she sort of became a detective because of this experience with her cousin, has to go back to Ireland and see if she can solve this case once and for all.
I muted myself so that I didn't interrupt you, but I am so intrigued. I'm already totally sucked in. I have to know more. As someone with a cousin who is more like a sister, shout out to Caitlin. I am immediately thinking I would go to Dublin to find her if I had to. So I cannot wait to know more. And I want to get into so much of that, but I cannot help but share some of your amazing blurbs. So New York Times bestselling author Deborah Crombie says, with its evocative Dublin setting, lyrical prose, tough but sympathetic heroine, and a killer twist in the plot, Sara Stewart Taylor's The Mountains Wild should top everyone's must-read list this year. Wow, what an amazing blurb that you got there, and clearly deservedly so. We want to know all about this book. So I know you grew up on Long Island and you went to school in Ireland. So how did your experiences in these two places inform the settings, which we have just heard praise for, in this book?
So the book is set in these two places that are just so important to me. And in many ways, these places are kind of the places that sort of made me who I am, if you know what I mean. I mean, they're Long Island, where I grew up. I lived there. I was born in the same town that I went to elementary school and high school in. And then went away to college in the States. I went to college actually here in Vermont. But then after college, I moved to Ireland. And it was, there were a bunch of different reasons for it, but growing up in a very Irish American community on Long Island, I sort of had this, my family, we had quite a bit of Irish heritage, but it wasn't a big part of our identity in the way that it was for some of my friends' families. Mm-hmm. But I had this just fascination with Irish culture and really literature. I was an English major and took a lot of Irish literature classes. And I just wanted to do it. So I did it. And I worked in Dublin for a couple of years and went to graduate school there. And it was just, just one of the sort of happiest and most fruitful periods of my life. So I love this idea of sort of going back and forth between those two really important places.
I love that. And when you were writing this book, did your time in Dublin ingrain the Irish brogue in your mind enough that it was easy for you to put on the page, or did you have to dust off that rusty memory? Or tell us about that.
So it's a great question, because I think certainly, I mean, writing this book, one of the things that I was terrified about was getting some of those details wrong. And I think we've all heard and seen and read sort of bad examples of Hiberno English, which is the English that is spoken in Ireland. And
I did not know that, actually.
I think we've all heard sort of the terrible Irish accents and the sort of stereotypical ones. And
like the Lucky Charms sort of. Yeah.
So I knew, and I think having studied Irish literature and history, I was so conscious of of the negative effects of those stereotypes throughout history, and where some of them come from, and the legacy of colonialism. And so I was really conscious that I didn't want to write characters who in any way fell into any of those categories. So it was a combination of talking to friends and sort of asking them about, is this a phrase that you would use with your parents at home or with your friends if you're out for the night? Is this a phrase that Irish people of your generation used when you were growing up? Do you still use it? If you live in Dublin, do you use it? If you live in the country, do you use, and it was really kind of, just doing my work around some of that, and then having Irish readers look at it and tell me what I got wrong. And I definitely got some things wrong, and was glad to be able to try to make it better.
Yes. And so first of all, as a major research nerd / nerd in general, I just want to say I so totally respect your research process. I love when something is so richly, carefully, intensely researched, and that reflects on the page. So when I, as a reader, read something like that, I just have such a deeper appreciation for that. So I'm already loving everything I hear. Second of all, I think we all need to know, what's something that you got wrong?
Oh, great question. So actually, it's funny. I was just telling somebody this, that at one point, I refer to, there's a lot of references to Irish history in the book. And at one point I refer to somebody's talking about something that happened in the, I want to say like the early to mid 1700s in Ireland.
Okay. So back a bit.
Exactly. And I'm trying to remember now exactly what my mistake was, but it was referring to either the English or the British. And I believe that I'd said British, and it was before the Union. And so, in fact, they would have been referred to as English, or maybe it was the other way around. Now I have to check that. But I fixed it. I had it wrong and I fixed it. And there were just little things like that are so important given the history there. And you just want to make sure you get them right. But it's there are many pitfalls in this business, and research is, I love research. Research is one of my favorite parts of doing this.
Me too. And I just want to say welcome to everybody on Facebook. I'm monitoring the questions over here on my second screen. This is your time with Sarah as much as it is my time. So if you have questions, just go ahead and type them in the chat box and I will pass them right to Sarah. So this is your time, and I'll keep the conversation going in the meantime. But if you have questions, just go ahead and type them. We're so excited that you're here, and we want to make sure. Lots of people are saying hi, friends. Yay, we're so excited. Sarah and Sarah are happy to have you here. So yes, if you have questions for her, just go ahead and put them in, and I will get them answered for you. In the meantime, Sarah, I think I'm just so intrigued by this idea, again, about this cousin who's more of a sister, because I resonate with that, going to Dublin and trying to find answers to her cousin's disappearance. And in the process, learning maybe some stuff about her cousin that she really didn't know. Because I think I'm just sort of fascinated, as we all are, about the concept of secrets and mysteries. And the idea of, as my friend and our fellow mystery / thriller writer Jason Pinter said, our secret selves, our public selves, and our private selves. There's all these different selves that we all have. So when someone has disappeared and someone that they love is trying to find out, it's interesting to sort of think about how do we come to really know the people that we love and what's involved in that process. I know you go really deep into this in your book. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I also love the idea of family secrets and that idea of the different selves we present to the public and to the people we love. And for me, this novel, the heart of this novel really is that relationship between Maggie and Erin, and the ways in which Maggie, who later in her life becomes a detective, sort of sees herself as the detective of Erin's inner life. She, throughout Erin's life, she struggled in various ways. She, as I said, she was sort of the wild cousin, and Maggie was stuck in the role as the good cousin. And, the way people get stuck in roles and families. And Erin's volatility never really made sense to Maggie. And so when Erin disappears, she needs to sort of finally come to know her cousin, who could be unpredictable, who could be cruel at times, and cruel to Maggie at times. And she starts thinking about the questions that she never asked Erin. She starts sort of interrogating her own memories of Erin and trying to put together enough of those memories to form a complete picture. And of course, that's what we all try to do, but sometimes we're missing essential memories that would tell us what we needed to know.
Yeah, exactly. And I think another thing that's so fascinating about families and family dynamics is how you can have the same experience, but very different memories of that same experience, even if you're in the same room and having the same conversation. And that's sort of fascinating as well. So I'm so excited to read this book. Why do you have a cousin that you're very close to? Why this book? Why now?
So great question. So I have quite a few cousins who are fantastic people. I actually am really lucky in my cousins. I have a wonderful brother, but I don't have a sister. And I now have a couple of wonderful sister-in-laws who I love very much. But growing up, I didn't have a sister. And I think I was always fascinated by my friends who had sisters close in age, who they were very close to. And I was just always fascinated by those relationships and, the ways in which they were like each other's best friend and best protector. And like the next minute, their greatest tormentor. And they're, just like, especially as kids, hopefully you sort of sort that out as you get older. But, and I was fascinated by that relationship. And so I think I wanted, for a variety of reasons, it made sense to make them cousins, but I wanted that kind of relationship. I wanted something really tight and intertwined. And because Erin's mother died when she was very young and the family owned this bar on Long Island, Erin often ended up having to sleep at Maggie's house, and Maggie's mother kind of, did a lot of mothering of her. And so they really sort of grew up like sisters.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to read this book. By the way, my partner in crime, Jenna, is moderating the comments, and she is posting links to Sarah's book through our very special partnership with Bookshop.org, which supports independent bookstores, which we all love. So go and get Sarah's book and do it through Bookshop.org, because that supports our beloved indies, and you can read this book. Sarah, gorgeous cover. Tell us the story about this cover. Was it love at first sight? Was this number 101? Tell us all the things.
Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, I love it too. I think it's just fantastic. And Minotaur did such a good job, and David at Minotaur is so talented and just did a beautiful job. So let's see. So yeah, it's interesting because I think when I thought about the cover in my head, with the title, it was, I think I sort of knew there would be mountains. Mm-hmm. And, but beyond that, I didn't really have, a really fixed idea of what it would look like. And as soon as I saw it, I just there's just something so mysterious about the woman kind of disappearing into the mountains. And I just, I think it's just so striking. Everyone who saw it was just like, oh yeah, that's, that pulls me in. I want to read that book. And I think the woman up at the top, it's interesting. That was kind of the only part of it that at first I wasn't quite sure about. And I was sort of like, what is she supposed to be a ghost? What is it? What is it? And the more I looked at it, the more I felt like it said something about the themes of the novel, that it really sort of conveyed, the sense of Maggie and Erin as this just interconnected pair. And even when Erin was somewhere where Maggie didn't know where she was still there. She was still so much a presence. And so I really came to like that part of it. And I just love the colors. I think is one of my favorite things about it. The color scheme is just so beautiful.
Yeah, the color scheme is gorgeous. Gail in our audience is saying she loves it too. Oh, she's saying the colors. She says she loves it. She loves the colors. They're so striking. And I think immediately I was drawn to it for that reason. But then the woman in the upper corner, who is the inverse of the woman running, I think that sort of immediately says to me, there is, the self that you see and the self that is reflected back to you. And these two women seeing and perceiving each other from their own points of view, and what does that look like from each of their points of view, and just sort of the idea of looking and perception. So yeah. I am intrigued. So tell us about the title. Did this come to you immediately? What are some titles that ended up on the cutting room floor? Tell us about the title.
Yeah, so titles, I find titles hard actually as a writer. I know I have friends who are writers who like the title, they have the title first thing, and the title stays with the book throughout the entire process of, and it's never quite that easy for me. So this book had a few different titles. At one point I was calling it just Erin, just the cousin's name. And but I think that was a little too on point, maybe. Erin, and then Erin is the Irish for Ireland as well. And so.
Oh, right. Erin Go Bra, of course.
So it was just a little too, I don't know. It was like, in retrospect, it was a little cheesy, I think.
So I like it.
I mean, so I was trying to think of something else, and the mountains are so important to this book because it's where Erin disappears, and it's where Maggie goes looking for her. And in many ways, I think there's this idea of kind of the undiscovered territory of Erin's life, and I love this sense of like this vast place that that Maggie was having to explore in a sense. So I was just thinking about different things, and in a traditional Irish song, which probably many people know, called Skibbereen, which is about immigration, there's a line, somebody's sort of looking back and thinking about Ireland and having left, and the line is, "The mountains rude and wild." And so I liked kind of playing with some of those words from, the book. In many ways, the book is also about immigration and about, the Irish Americans on Long Island, and this sort of misunderstanding of of a place they think they know really well, and exploring that. So it just seemed like a good title, and people liked it, and that's what we ended up with.
Oh, yay. And Gail is saying the cover and that it is a mystery were the primary reasons that she tuned in today. So covers matter. Gail, we totally agree. Thank you for tuning in and for your feedback. Oh, Andrea is saying she was lucky enough to get an ARC and it was so good. Yay. I'm just wondering, let's put a question out to the audience. Oh, Glennie is saying covers have a definite influence, locations as well. We totally agree, Glennie. Thank you for saying that. And how many people, let's put it out to the audience, how many people have been to Ireland? How many people want to go to Ireland? I know I have been to Dublin and the surrounding areas, and it is indeed the greenest place I've ever been. And it was such a beautiful place. And I can't wait to go back. So while people are thinking about that, let's get to some more questions. So Sarah, how long did it take you to write this book?
So this book, I mean, if I'm honest, I would probably say, 20 years. Because
okay, we need you to be honest. We need you to be honest.
It's a story that I had been kind of carrying around in my head and trying to figure out how to write ever since I lived in Ireland in the mid 90s. And while I was living there was a young American woman who very tragically disappeared in the mountains near Dublin. And in the subsequent years, a number of Irish women would also just very tragically disappear. And many of the cases were not solved. And so I sort of had this, I just had this, these real life cases in my head, but I knew I didn't want to, write something that was taken from the actual cases. I knew I wanted to fictionalize it, and I knew I wanted to write about an American woman who goes to Ireland to look for her missing loved one. And that was sort of, once I figured out that was how I wanted to tell the story, I really started, and that was probably 3 years ago. So I'd say the book really from start to finish took me, once I had the idea, it was sort of probably two years.
Wow, that's fast. That's amazing. And I like that you talk about the idea, of these seeds sort of gestating and germinating, and from your time in Ireland in the mid 90s, the woman disappearing. And I think that idea that someone can just disappear and it isn't solved, the unknownness of it sticks with us because we like closure. I know I do. So it's a lot. I think when something is unsolved, it definitely sticks with me, and it sounds like you as well. So many people are saying Ireland is a bucket list location. Oh, Andrew's been 3 times, loved it. Gail is jealous. She wants to go someday. Her husband's been, everyone go to Ireland as soon as this COVID is over and get over there to that beautiful green land. So yeah, and tell us about your writing practice. Do you rise with the sun and flow effortlessly to your desk and the words pour forth, or are you sort of working by moonlight and wine? I mean, what's it look like? Tell us.
So first of all, I love that there are all those different kinds of writers. And so I find it so much fun to talk to people about their writing practice, because there's like everything under the sun is a possibility. So I've always been a morning writer. I love mornings. I've always felt like the hours between like 5 and 9 are kind of my
5
9 hours. Like if every day I could sit down from 5 to 9, that would be ideal. That would be perfect. So what
time do you get up to be writing by 5?
I mean, sort of like 10 of,
Okay.
When I'm doing that, and I'm going to give a little disclaimer in a second, but when I have been in that routine, I have the coffee ready to go and just get up, get to the desk. So that was always my routine. That was how I wrote my first 4 books. And then I had kids and everything went out the window. And for a while my kids were young, I just would write whenever I could. I got good at sort of grabbing 20 minutes in the car here and, an hour when somebody's napping here. And I became sort of, I was definitely not as productive during those years. But I learned to write at other times, I think, which was valuable. But now that my kids are older and are sleeping reliably and all that, I'm coming back to my morning routine, and I just love it. It's so, you know, especially this time of year when it's light and I can go outside and sit on the porch and write, and I just love it. The mornings are my time.
Oh, I love that you have your time and this image of you, you know, sitting in the beautiful Vermont pastoral setting and looking out upon perhaps mountains and sitting there and writing. It sounds very lovely, albeit early. I'm a night person. The only time I'm up till 5 is when I'm still up.
Yeah.
Otherwise I shall not be gracing the morning with my presence. But I love that you have this sort of quiet time to yourself, and that makes so much sense. We have a question from the audience. Andrea says, your book is being compared to Tana French. High praise, absolutely high praise. She says, will there be more books forthcoming? Tell us.
Yeah, so first of all, that's so nice. And she is in a category by herself. I don't think anybody really compares. She's her, you know, just like her command of dialogue and character. Those characters are just amazing. And I'm such a huge fan. So will there be another one? Yes, I'm working on a second Maggie D'Arcy mystery right now. It's a little difficult because I don't want to give too much away, because if I give too much away about the second book, it might spoil the first book for some people. So I'm being very cagey about it, but I'm really excited about it. And it's been fun I love writing series because you fall back into this world that is so much fun to be in, and you've created characters and created history and background, and I get to go back to that world, and I'm in it right now, and it's really fun.
Are you finding it easier to go back than to create it for those Tana French fans that we have the Dublin murder squad, and so we've seen the same, different sort of characters? Is it easier for you to go back than it is to have created it in the first place?
In certain ways, yes, because you've done, I think when you've written one book especially about a main character, you've done a lot of the work on that character. You know what makes her tick, what her fears are and what her favorite foods are. And you just, you sort of have a familiarity with that person. But I think what's challenging is figuring out kind of what to bring into a new book and what to leave behind. I think that can always be really challenging for series writers. Do you bring all the characters along? You want to introduce some new characters, but you don't want your cast of characters to get too big. So how do you navigate the cast of characters? I think that's one of the things that people sometimes struggle with.
So I know you love Tana French. Who else do you love and admire as a mystery writer?
This past year was such a good year. I feel like I discovered so many great crime writers this year. So one of the crime writers I discovered this past year, who I just think she's one of the best writers writing anything right now, is Attica Locke. Have you read Attica Locke?
I have not yet. Tell me. I love learning about new people.
She writes she's written a couple of different one series, and then she wrote a standalone called The Cutting Season, which is just fantastic. But she has this new series about a Black Texas Ranger, and he's just he's such a great character. I just love him. And the books are fantastic. So Bluebird is one that I would say start with, and you'll love her. Her writing is beautiful. Her characters are amazing. And the setting is it's this East Texas setting that's it's so good. So I'm always talking about her these days. Let's see. I love Irish crime writers, and there's some really great Irish crime writers who are writing right now. There's an Irish writer named Dervla McTiernan who writes a series that I love, and there's another Irish writer named Jane Casey who writes a great series. Catherine Ryan Howard There are a bunch of like Olivia Kiernan actually is another really good Irish crime writer. There are a lot of women writing great Irish crime novels right now, I would say. So go out and look for some of those.
Ooh, thank you for all these wonderful international writer recommendations, and especially shout out to female crime writers, mystery writers. I love learning about new authors, and I especially appreciate that. Sarah, tell us, what do you think the most important aspect of writing a suspenseful, page-turning, keep the reader up until 3 a.m., I've got to have one more chapter kind of book is? Tell us your secret.
Yeah. So creating, I mean, really we're talking about like creating suspense, right?
Yeah.
And how do you create suspense? How do you, when I've taught writing classes, I always tell, people who are starting out in their writing journey, that you want your reader to be emotionally engaged with what's happening. You want them to feel like, if the character lives or dies, it matters, and it matters to that reader. And the only way you earn that is by creating really full rounded characters who feel like real people. And so for me, I think a lot of times people talk about suspense in terms of plot, but I think real suspense comes from great characters, and having characters who your reader, cares about on some level. Even if they're not totally sympathetic, the reader cares what happens to the people who populate your novel. And so I think starting there is good. And then, just the stakes are really important. What are the stakes? How do we know what the stakes are for this character? And do we understand how big or small they are?
Ooh, these are such thought-provoking and interesting answers. Thank you so much for that. I love that. And you're right, most people do talk about it in terms of plot, and I haven't heard the character answer before. So thank you for that extremely insightful, thought-provoking answer. I love it. I feel like we've been talking for a second, but it turns out we've been talking for half an hour, so it's time for us to enter the lightning round. Sarah, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, perfect. So you've already told us you are a morning writer. Tell us, would you rather be stuck in Area 54 with H.P. Lovecraft or Stephen King?
So I live in Vermont, and H.P. Lovecraft has some really interesting Vermont connections. And I just love how deliciously strange he is. So I'm going to say H.P. Lovecraft.
That is the first time we have had that answer. So in an area that is known for alien activity, suspected government fencing off of alien interactions, and all sorts of other terrifying stuff, you would choose to be there with H.P. Lovecraft, who you already even is a little kind of scary. Who knew Sarah was so brave? I love it. I love it. Okay. What is a word that gives you the heebie-jeebies that you would never use in a book?
A word that gives me the heebie-jeebies. I mean, this is hard for me because I love words, and I think even words that give people heebie-jeebies, can sometimes be used very well in books to give characters the heebie-jeebies. But let's see. I mean, the one that everybody says, but it's really true. Moist is kind of a word.
It doesn't bother me because I like moist chocolate chip cookies and chocolate cake.
There is something about saying it though. It just, I don't know.
Okay, so moist is one of our authors last week, Patricia Shanae Smith, said puberty. She couldn't even say it. She said it's the thing between childhood and adulthood. She couldn't even bring herself to say it. So it's so interesting what freaks out different people. Yeah. Tell us, what was your favorite childhood book?
Oh, my favorite childhood book. I mean, I was I loved crime novels early on, and we had a really good friend who lived in Wales and would send me, at that point, you couldn't really get the Fantastic Five books in the States. And so she would send me all the, the Fantastic, I don't even remember what they were all called, the Fantastic Five and the Fantastic Four and all of those about groups of kids solving mysteries. I loved Nancy Drew. I loved Harriet the Spy. I loved all those books about kids sort of out. Oh, I loved actually a book that was really, really important to me for reasons that I am still unpacking sort of is from the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basely Frankweiler by E.L. Konigsberg.
Okay, yeah.
So it's about a brother and a sister who run away from home and set up camp in the Metropolitan Museum of Art and sleep there for a few days. And they get involved in a sort of art mystery. And it's just a great book. That was one of the ones that was sharing with my own kids was just so much fun.
Oh my gosh, I love this. And a shout out to my partner in crime, Jenna, who is moderating the comments, and she says, we agree, moist equals vom. So it's like Jenna and I say to each other, there's vom and then there's major vom. Sleepaway Camp with Arthur Conan Doyle or Edgar Allan Poe?
Oh gosh. I mean, I'm a huge Sherlock Holmes fan, but I sort of feel like it would be more, well, I was going to say it would be more fun with Poe, but Poe wasn't much fun. I think I'll go with Arthur Conan Doyle.
Yeah, I think Poe would be like, it was lights off at 11:00 and it's 11:0001. Lights off, lights off.
Well, and he's the guy who would, you know, in the middle of the night would like play creepy pranks on you and make strange noises outside your tent, I think.
Based on your Area 54 answer, that's who I thought you were going to go with.
Yeah, you know.
All right, last one. Road trip with Mary Shelley or your fellow Vermonter, Shirley Jackson.
Oh, Shirley Jackson, definitely.
So the author of The Lottery, where one person in the town got killed by random choice, that's who you taking your road trip with?
So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've been reading a lot about Shirley Jackson. I mean, there's been a lot about her lately, and I've been reading a lot of her nonfiction and some of her other kind. And she was hilarious. She was a very funny person. She was just a great. I just imagine a road trip with her would be fun.
I think a road trip with her would be fun. I wouldn't want to enter a lottery with her.
Right. So that would just don't do that.
Yeah, that's not going to go well for you. Oh my gosh. Sarah Stewart Taylor, author of The Mountains Wild, congratulations on your brand new book with your beautiful cover and your Irish Dream and all of the amazing accolades you've gotten so far. We can't wait to read it. Thank you so much for joining us here on A Mighty Blaze. Everybody, be sure to follow Sarah on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and buy her gorgeous book, which we've linked to through bookshop.org, so you can support indie bookstores. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you soon.
Great. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, A Mighty Blaze.
Yay!